Welcome everyone, good morning, afternoon and evening. Today is Saturday, so we are deep into the weekend now after the debate about whether Friday is part of the weekend or not. Today we have something to talk about, which is something related to Mythic Plus. What is related to Mythic Plus for today is going to be the affix rotation that will happen in Mythic Plus once Mythic Plus releases. To everyone who is not aware, the expansion launches on the 28th, depending on your location, and then it's gonna stay on hold for 2 weeks until December the 12th. That's when Mythic Plus is going to open. That is also when Normal, and then Heroic, and then Mythic will also open at the same time with Mythic Plus. Now, what is worth talking about today is the fact that we do know, given the rotation cycle of the beta of the Mythic Plus affixes, which rotation of affixes we are going to get as soon as Mythic Plus launches. It's also worth reminding for everyone who had forgotten about this, but I guess this is going to be a pleasuring reminder that in Dragonflight we are leaving behind, we are saying goodbye to both Necrotic and Inspiring. Those affixes are dead, they are gone, and even if we are losing these two affixes, we are actually not getting any compensation, we are not getting any replacement, we simply are going to get into Dragonflight with two fewer affixes, and that's it. I am a fan, of course, like many others, like most others, of the removal of Necrotic. It did put quite some extra weight and quite some extra work required on your tanks, so I don't think it was that necessary of an affix. I am a little bit more off on the removal of Inspiring. I never thought Inspiring was too bad. I think the main reason why players disliked it is because sometimes it required a bit of an extra round of crowd control on the Inspiring mob, or a little bit more of single target damage instead of going full AoE Mongoloid on the pack, which is something players don't like to do. But besides that, I don't think it was a bad affix or a too oppressive affix. Either way, Blizzard decided to get rid of it. So, the combinations. The combinations, of course, are with Thundering, the new seasonal affix. So, we do know, given the rotation of affixes we have gotten from the beta, that the first couple of weeks, we can even extend this to the first 4 weeks of the expansion, so the first month, where very likely you're going to get the most amount of players, the most amount of entries in Mythic Plus. So those 4 weeks are likely going to be more important, right? So you would be happy to see some easier weeks, some easier combination of affixes in the first few weeks, right? Because those are going to be very important for you, your alts, right? Trying to get to Keystone Master, trying to get to your achievements early on, right? Those are pretty cool. Those are going to be quite important. So week 1, the first week is going to be fortified with Raging and Quaking. So it's a good start. I would give this an 8 out of 10, I would say, as an entry level first week. That is exactly what you would wish for, you know. We have new dungeons, players are going to be completely clueless, they won't know the mechanics, they won't know the strategies, players won't have refined different skips and different tips and tricks on how to maximize their key, so having something like Quaking is quite nice. It's not really going to be that big of a problem. Having something like Raging as well is not going to be too big of an issue. Raging has been nerfed multiple times by now, it's fully dispellable at this point. Not only that, but the new class, which you will likely get to have many of in Dragonflight, the new class has the ability to take an AoE Enraged Dispel, so that is also very, very useful in the first week with Raging, so it's a good start. It's a good start. Perhaps it's also better to have fortified on week 1 because, you know, having much harder bosses when players don't know the mechanics of the bosses on week 1 on Tyrannical would perhaps be a little bit worse, right? I think that would be worse. I think you have more ways to fail and try again on fortified with harder trash than to fail and try again on a Tyrannical week. Now, what is worth reminding everyone, in case you might be thinking, well, but the first week of Mythic Plus doesn't really matter. Mythic Plus is going to be locked in item level because we have to wait for the Mythic Raid to open, so it's not that we can push keys very high in week 1 because there is no higher item level reward. Remember what I said about 3 minutes ago? Mythic Raiding is gonna come out at the same time as Normal and Heroic. So there won't be a 1 week waiting time. There won't be a delay in when Mythic Plus will be able to reward you with max item level rewards. There is not going to be any lock on the item level. It's gonna be the full version from week 1. So even the first week of Mythic Plus will be still relevant if you want to push higher keys. Now, where we start getting the issues with this rotation is in week 2. Because what we have for us in week 2 is going to be Tyrannical, Bursting, and Grievous. So this week is going to be a very rough week for healers. It's a very free week for tanks. That's nice. The first week wasn't that big of a deal for tanks either, so they also get a pretty easy second week. However, this is going to be quite the nightmare for healers. Now, for very good groups, these are actually some manageable affixes, especially the coordinated pre-made groups. It's not that big of an issue, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's the second week of the expansion. There's going to be a myriad of players joining Mythic Plus, and that's where you will find the most horrible scenarios in your keys. Not being in sync with defeating the enemies is going to give you multiple stacks of bursting. The damage of the stacks of bursting will become even higher because you have Grievous ticking down on multiple players in your party, so it will be quite nasty. What makes it even nastier is, of course, in Tyrannical, with the much harder bosses, with also Grievous, making them hit even more, especially in Dragonflight, where we have this new idea, this new direction from Blizzard, where there are going to be quite a few scenarios where bosses will hit for a lot. Basically in AoE, basically to all of the party, all of the players will take a lot of damage, which is going to make Grievous even more dangerous in Mythic Plus. Grievous bursting combination, especially early on in a tier, where players are still quite not up to speed with all the mechanics from the bosses and the trash, can be quite dangerous. Then you have the third and fourth week to finish the month, to finish the very important first month of the expansion for Mythic Plus. The next one is Fortified, Sanguine, and Volcanic. Beautiful week for the DPS and the healers. A bit less perhaps for the tanks, because Sanguine can create problems with tank management. As a healer, you are likely never going to worry about taking damage or players taking damage from Sanguine by too much. Volcanic is also very simple. It should be an afterthought for your party. As I said, the only problem you might find is the fact that it's fortified, so trash is harder, and then it's Sanguine, which can heal the trash by quite large amounts if you're not careful, if you're not planning around displacements, knockbacks, and pull-ins to take away the enemies from the pools of Sanguine. But besides that, it's quite the easy week and quite a chill week. And then you finish the month again with a decent week, because Tyrannical, Raging, and Storming is going to be the next set of affixes. Surprising, right? It's surprising because I have not yet mentioned things like Spiteful, like Explosive, like Bolstering, and yet we have already a second round of Raging. Tyrannical, Raging, and Storming. Storming, more or less on the same level of Volcanic, albeit perhaps a bit more annoying for the melee players to dodge, but still not really that big of an issue for you. And then Raging, this time it's even easier to deal with because it's not even fortified. It's not even fortified mobs getting enraged, it's Tyrannical, so mobs are even less threatening with Raging on this week. So if we had to make a recap of the first week before finishing off the rest of the weeks more quickly, it's a pretty good first month. It's a pretty good first rotation of affixes. I think they are all, actually, I would put them all in the easy category, with the exception of the Tyrannical, Bursting, and Grievous week, the second week and your first Tyrannical week. You know, if you think you could have gotten things like Bolstering in your first weeks, things like Spiteful in your first weeks, and instead you have gotten things like Volcanic, Storming, Quaking, and Raging, that is very good. You know, if I were to ask you, what do you think, in your opinion, now that Inspiring and Necrotic are gone, which are the easiest affixes you would like to deal with in Mythic Plus? I would say the majority of the answers would have been Volcanic, and then Quaking, and then Storming, and then Raging. I think it's very good. It's a very good first week of Mythic Plus. Now, after that, the following weeks are as follows. The fifth week will be Spiteful and Grievous, a bit hard on the melee camp as usual, whenever there is a Spiteful week, but not too much. Sixth week is going to be Tyrannical with Sanguine and Explosive, a bit harder, especially on the management this time. The healer managing explosives, the tank managing Sanguine, might be quite frustrating and time consuming without being too difficult, so perhaps a bit frustrating this week. 7th week is Fortified, Bolstering and Storming. Storming is not an issue. Bolstering might trigger you a few times if you mess up the kill order of your trash pack. Week 8 is Tyrannical, Spiteful and Quaking. Also a pretty handy and decent week. Week 9 is Fortified with Bursting and Explosive. This might be a little bit more annoying because it might be putting a lot of pressure on your healer during bursting, but the healer already has pressure on because he has to deal with explosives. So it might be quite the healer intensive week, week 9. And lastly, week 10, Bolstering and Volcanic. Once again, yes, Bolstering is annoying, but Volcanic is much, much easier. You know, once I finish listing all of this, you might realize, He actually has mentioned quite a lot of weeks, and I haven't really found one week which particularly stood out to me as being awful. You know, besides the second one, Bursting and Grievous, the rest of the weeks are all pretty chill. If we go back to Season 3, the last round of affix combinations we had, you had things like Inspiring and Grievous, like Spiteful and Necrotic. You also had Spiteful and Necrotic in Tyrannical, not just in Fortified. You also had Sanguine and Grievous together. You had multiple weeks where the combinations were quite annoying. And a lot of this was helped, of course, by Inspiring and by Necrotic being in the pool. So I think that given this new list, this new rotation of affixes, it is looking quite good, quite laid back in terms of combinations for the first season of Mythic Plus in Dragonflight. Of course, every single one of these will be paired with Thundering, which is not that big of a deal. The biggest problem you will have with Thundering, honestly, is getting triggered that someone ran next to you 2 seconds after getting the orb on their head, pairs with you and takes away your 30% damage buff when you had 12 seconds left to the buff. That's basically the most people will get triggered by this seasonal affix. Not having the almost max uptime on the 30% damage buff because players just randomly run next to them and clear the debuff. So it's not really going to be that big of a problem to manage this Thundering debuff. So most of the difficulty will come from the general affixes, which, as we have just seen, the combination of affixes seem to be quite laid back and quite chill, which is nice to see for this first season of Mythic Plus. Now, with this round of information around the Mythic Plus season coming quite soon at this point, in basically 3 weeks, we can stop for this Saturday. Of course, as usual, I am going to thank everyone, starting from my Patreon supporters, for contributing and for helping to support myself and this channel. Your help is very much appreciated. We can also go in and thank everyone who tuned in for my first stream on Thursday. Thank you guys. That is a good help on helping me to tune things and to make things ready for the Dragonflight release, as I need to fix and troubleshoot a few of the issues that I get while I start my stream. So that's also very much appreciated. And of course, you can still support in other ways that don't include having to spend money. For example, liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. You can then, lastly, for more social interactions and similar stuff, you can follow me on Twitter. You can subscribe to my Patreon to get access to my Discord server as well. And lastly, of course, I am now also found on Twitch at this link as well, generally starting to stream from 10 p.m. European time, 1 p.m. Pacific time, and 4 p.m. Eastern. That's usually when I start my stream. So with this out of the way, thank you guys for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, okay, I'm gonna make it. I can actually go out and shop for some groceries before the shops close. This video was supposed to be 10 minutes long at best. How did we get here?